this PPT in this All India Research Scholar group. Many times I have shared this, and I will also share today also. So don't worry for that. And if you go for, please, you can just maybe I will discuss something, and then I will open it. And if you have any questions, you will ask me. I will try my best to answer each questions. Okay, so remember one thing that we called as a questionnaire, that we called as a schedule. Okay, these are the technically in research language that we call as a tools for data collections, that you have to keep in mind. So when you go for the technically, so on this contest, I will, if you go for, so just imagine, so you read the what is written there. So basically, these are technically in research language, we call as instrument or tools of data collections. Okay, so you try to understand. I will explain. You just read this point, what is written there. So if you go for on this contest, that particularly if you go for, so when you say questionnaire is nothing but set of questions. Okay, so set of questions that a researcher, that means you, will prepare for your study to find out the answer to your objective. Okay, please, you just read what is written there. I am just explaining in my language. I hope I have no options. Many people are now joining, but I can't do anything. So let no, it's not possible. Okay, so this slide is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Please read. Just don't. So remember one thing. So I will share my own experience and the practical experience, and also I will share this PPT and also a set of questions or questionnaire or schedule that you just for your reference in All India Research Scholar group. So remember one thing. So the first step you need to ask yourself. So you understand, read. So particularly on the contest that we are talking about. So you understand. So a questionnaire is a research instrument that consists of number of questions, and you as a researcher, you will collect these questions from the respondent to find out the answer to your research objective. So in the questions that you will formulate, the objective of these questions that you will formulate to find out the answer to the objective. So maybe, so you as a researcher, when you are doing research work, okay, so maybe from the respondent, you will able to know their perception, their behavior, their knowledge, their socioeconomic background related to your research. So you try to understand in your language. When you say questionnaire is a tool of data collection. Okay, it is a set of questions, and that set of questions will answer your research objective. Clear? So you read this slide, what is written there, line by line. Okay, so I hope I will share, many times I have shared it, and you just look at it. So now, so what is the first step I always encourage whenever you are planning to do your primary base study? So always I say that all my dear friends, please keep in this point that I always say you write down your objective first. Okay, because remember one thing, first, what you have to clearly, in a white paper, you write down your objective of your study. First page. The second point you try to keep in mind, the second point is that, so you write down in a white paper the objective of the study. And the second point, write down what are the indicator or variable with respective to that variable. Sorry, to that objective. Clear? This is the second point. So please, so what you have to do, now first you need to ask yourself, before you proceed for your development of the questionnaire or the set of questions, you need to ask, so what information you want to collect from the respondent, and what is the nature of the, particularly the informations that you want to collect. Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? Okay, so you, whenever, because you need to, and also who is your target population? Second point, you need to keep in mind. Whenever you are, so always formulating the questionnaire for your field survey, so you first think like this. I'm just sharing just my experience that you as a researcher, what you need to do. Okay, so you understand. So you need to be very clear that first, what type of information you want to collect with respective to your research objective. Okay, so that means what type of data you want to collect. First, is it quantitative data? Is it qualitative data? Okay, now then you ask yourself, so are you collecting the demographic data? Are you collecting the socioeconomic data? Are you collecting the attitudinal data? Are you collecting the behavioral data? Are you collecting the institutional data? Whatever data that you are collecting or planning to collect, so you need to be very clear from the past before, so you formulate the questions. Clear? So you understand. I'm just giving one example. So suppose I want to collect a data, you just look at it. Many times I say, you just, this is here. This slide is changing.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Please,
sir.
just look at it. Please, I have no options. Many people are waiting. So I will share this this video. Please, don't chat here that they are not joining. I have no options. Maybe next time onwards, I'll think on what to do. So if you go for particularly, so you clear. Now you write. So first I say, write down your objective first in a white paper. Second, within the objective, what are the variables that you want to collect from the respondent with specific to this objective. So you just, this is my objective. I have write down this objective. So the objective is to find out the sources of income of tribal people in Odisha. Okay, so if you go for particularly on this contest, so you just think on this aspect that, so you, what are the variables that I want to collect from this objective one from the respondent. Okay, so you ask yourself, like in this objective, so sources of income. So you ask yourself that we want to collect or ask the questions to the respondent. particularly on the context of this objective. So if you go for, so what are the variables or indicators that you want to for this objective? So sources of income. So you just divide income from agriculture, income from labor work, income from livestock, income from Manrega work, income from small business, income from agriculture, income from forestry, that we call as a minor forest studies. Okay, so income from art and craft. So that means you as a researcher, whenever you are doing on this, so you need to be very, very clear, because it will very easy if you as a researcher, whenever you are formulating the questions, so if you clear about the variables or indicator, it is very easy that you can make the questions, and it is easy for particularly on the contest that how you will formulate the questions. Okay, so maybe you just look at, I will show you one example on this contest. So I hope you understand this point. Okay, then, so you just look at it, the slide that I have written. Okay, so here, so most of the students, I always say, all my dear friends, many times I always ask, many students have no idea the difference between questionnaire and schedule. Please read by yourself. Please read line by line, read this, what is written there. So remember one thing. So remember, so questionnaire is an instrument. Schedule is also an instrument. That means set of questions. Your name, your father name, your mother's name, your occupation, your land holding. Are you getting point? Set of questions related to your research objective. So that technically that we are. If this set of questions, so this instrument, if this set of questions, so you know that who will provide the information? Now the respondent. If the set of questions, who? You are the researcher. You researchers send the set of questions to the respondent. How? By mail, by courier, by speed post, and the respondent himself, herself, write the answer and return back to the researcher, that we called as a questionnaire. Please repeat, please, whatever I am telling, you just keep in your mind, because I have seen many times, many students have no idea on this point. Okay, so you try to be clear on this point. That means a set of questions, if the researcher sent to the respondent by mail, by courier, by speed post, and the respondent himself, herself, write the answer and return back to the researcher, that we called as a questionnaire. If the same thing, the researcher go to the field and ask the question to the respondent, respondent asks answer, researcher write the answer, that we call as a schedule. Most of the field study in the social science, that whenever we are going for the field survey, we are doing through schedule, not questionnaire. During COVID time, most of the online Google Sheet, you know, so that is that we use as a questionnaire method, and all other differences are there. I am not going to discuss all this point, but please try to understand this point. Am I clear so far?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Here, please read. Always one point I will share here. I have already shared this in the WhatsApp group. So, but you try to understand. If you are using questionnaire, it is response rate is very low. Every time Google Sheet that in the platform that people are sharing, so your response rate is very low because we don't have a time. Most of the cases that it is difficult. So in that, always you need to keep in mind that I always encourage on looking at your responsive study, please go to the field and always use this schedule. This is the best way, but on your research objective, all the other points are there. And also, if you are using questionnaire, always remember one thing. You needs to, if you want to collect information from 100 people, please send to 500 people so that at least you can get this 4 or 100 respondents. That you have to keep in mind. Clear? Okay, so you understand this point as a researcher. So this is the first step. So you as a researcher, so what you have to do? Now you need to write down in a all objective. Then from each objective, what are the indicator? What are the variable with respective to that objective? Because most of the students I have seen, their objective is different and the questions they have formulated is different. Okay, so our intention should be there that the questions that I will formulate for my study should exactly related to the objective. Our intention is that the objective that we have formulated for our study, that should be exactly, so the questions that you need to ask the respondent, that should be correctly linked to your research objective, research questions, research hypothesis. That is the important point. All my dear researcher, please keep this point as important indicator on this ground. Now, okay, so you understand this is the what do you mean by questionnaire, what do you mean by schedule. So all these are the technically research language that we call as a research instrument, that we call as a tools of data collections, and that particularly exactly related to your research objective. Okay, so that is the most important point. You as a researcher, whenever you are doing this, you need to be very, very clear on this point. So now you understand this point. And also, you need to be very clear on this point. You read what is written in this slide. So please, so you try to keep on this point that whenever you are formulating, so you understand first stage, second stage. Now, another dimensions always in this questionnaire that you as a researcher, you need to know that, so your questions should be related to your objective, should related to your hypothesis, should related to your research questions. This is the point. And another dimension, which is very, very essential, that you need to be very clear. That is important dimension. I will discuss detail. The nature of questions. Is it like that particularly open-end questions and close-end questions? This is very, very essential. That means, so you just look at the different steps that I have already discussed. But the most important point, whenever, so you identify your objective, you identify your indicator, you identify your variable. Now you are set that you need to formulate the research question. And one point, always remember one thing, you need to ask, who is your respondent? Who is your target population? Do they have the idea, particularly the information that you want to collect? And that is very essential. Okay, that this component that we call as the target populations, that the respondent and their knowledge, their literacy, their all these different dimensions, I hope you know. So I am not going on that point. So, but the important dimension that we call as the type of questions. Okay, so that means whether it is open-end questions, whether it is closed-end questions. Okay, so that means you need to decide, yeah, from past. If you go for, you know, open-end questions means and closed-end questions means. Try to understand. When you say open-end questions is that questions where the respondent is free to answer the way he, or she likes. Suppose I say, I ask you, what about your impression or understanding the research methodology course or class that I am doing since last continuous more than 3 years on each Sunday? So you are free to answer the way. Suppose I say after the class, I want to get the feedback of all the students. So you are open. So suppose if I ask, what about the class that Minaketan has taken? So you are free to answer. That means when you say open-end questions, so you are free to answer, or the respondent is free to answer the way he or she likes. First point. Second point, when you go for close-end questions is that questions in which the respondent is restricted to the way he or she answer. Are you getting the point? That means it is restricted. You only I suppose I can. Do you like Minaketan class? Yes or no? Only two options. You like, agree, disagree. Okay, only option, restricted. So you don't have a freedom to answer like that particularly that we called as a open-end questions. This is the first point you need to keep in mind. And the second important point, all my dear researcher, okay, that always close-end questions is used for quantitative study. You need to keep in mind always. Suppose I am doing quantitative study, my sample size is large. I want to collect data in terms of number, in terms of magnitude. In that context, we always use close-end questions. If you are doing qualitative study and you're as a sociologist, anthropologist, political science, history, sociology. So if you are doing qualitative research, broadly, we use the technically that we call as a open-end question. Generally, this is not hard and fast rule that you need to follow on this point. Now, so what is the structure that you as a researcher, whenever you are formulating the questionnaire, so you try to be very clear. Okay, the nature of the question, whether it is open-end, whether it is closed-end, whether it is multiple choice, whether it is Likert scale choice, whether it is contingency questions, whether it is matrix questions, whether it is the bipolar questions. Okay, so I will explain detail and don't worry for that. So always you as a researcher, so you needs to be very clear so on this. That means, so you just look at it whenever you are developing or designing or formulating questions for your research work. This is the preliminary stage. You need to ask this question to yourself. Am I clear or not? Hmm?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good. Now, so if you go for now, what is the structure or how we'll proceed, how we'll design questions? So this technically term, you just look at it. I have written here that we called as a questionnaire design. Questionnaire design means, so generally the layman language, that what are the questions that you will formulate for your study, what is the nature of the questions or format, whether it is closed-end questions, whether it is open-end questions, and what is the order of the questions, are getting point, and also how you organize the questions. Okay, and also that technical term that we call as a pilot testing. I will explain detail whenever you will proceed on this aspect. Now, okay, so you understand this point. So that means, so whenever you are designing a questionnaire or schedule for your study, so you needs to be, what is the content? Content means your objective. What type of information you want to collect for your objective, and also the wording, particularly how the questions will be, whether it is closed-end, whether it is open-end, whether it is a Likert scale, whether it is bipolar, particularly what is the nature of the questions that you want to make. And then their sequence, their order. Okay, so I will explain detail. I hope you know on this. Am I clear? The slide is visible. Please read once. Read once quickly. Okay, so you can, so I have already explained, so I do not need to explain this point. I have already explained. Now you just go to this here. And also this is because you need to be, whenever you are trying to formulate the questions, you need to be very clear whether you are using questionnaire or you are using schedule. Remember one thing, if you are using questionnaire, so your question structure will be different, because you do not know the respondent. You have no idea about the knowledge or the literacy level or the understanding of the respondent. Okay, so in that context, so whenever you are formulating the questions, so there is that we call as a method. Okay, method of data collections. So these are the instrument, whether you are using survey method, whether you have using interview method, whether you have used focus group discussion method, whether you have used, if you go for particularly on the contest, that we called as a observation method. So you need to be very clear that using this instrument, whenever you are formulating the questions, so you need to be very clear. So how you as a researcher or the method that you are using this for data collection, that you need to be very clear on this point. Now, so you just look at it, this point. If you go for, this is the, I have already explained the close end here. This slide is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have already explained the same point. This is important. I will give little bit on this aspect. Then you try to understand because it is very important in this sense, because you are master of your thesis. If your question is wrong, so your information that you will collect from the respondent is wrong. Your whole analysis will be wrong. So because of this, I always say, this point you need to keep in mind, that the questions that you will formulate, that should be related to your object. Okay, now, so if you go for your questions, in the social science, I say that broadly, if you are doing quantitative study, so in that context, most of the cases, we use this that we call as a closed-end questions. So closed-end questions is of different types. You just look at it. I hope you know. So, but I will try to give on more on this point. And if you have any doubt, you just ask me. I will try to answer that question. So you just look at it. So one is that we called as a simple, if you go for closed-end questions, where respondent has no freedom. Okay, only the researcher will give the options. Yes, no, agree, disagree, all the point. So I have already explained this point. Now, if you go for closed-end questions is of different types. Simple dichotomy, multiple choice, scale questions, matrix questions, contingency questions. And this multiple choice questions is of two types. One is determinant choice, another is checklist. I hope you all know. I will explain you one by one, and you just look at it. If you have any problems, you will ask me. I will try my best to answer each questions. When you go for this point, the questions I'm not going to read. I will share the PPT. I have already, if you go for just the dichotomy questions that we are talking about. So that in this context, so you as a researcher, so maybe yes, that means when you say only two options are there, it's because of die means two. Okay, two options are there. So most of I always encourage maybe yes, no, agree, disagree, like, dislike, true, false. Okay, so these are the restricted way that particularly on the contest that we are talking about. Clear on this point. Now, if you go for that we call as a on another dimension that you just look at it, multiple choice questions. Multiple choice questions I have given. One is that particularly on the contest that we called as a, if you go for, I have given, one is determinant questions, another one is your, that we call as a multiple option. What is the word that I have used? Just give me one option. Checklist, yes. So if you go for, I hope you all know better than me on the contest. That means you have multiple options. Like if you go for, out of the multiple options, you are selecting one option. You have multiple options. Suppose if you go for, particularly on this, so you just look at the example that I have given. So out of your UGC net questions, all the civil service that you are appearing, so here there is multiple, out of multiple options, if you are selecting one, so that we call as a, if you go for the determinant questions. And if you go for checklist, what do you mean by checklist? That means out of the multiple option, not you are choosing only one. You can choose one, you can choose two, you can choose three, whatever you like. You just look at it. The example that I have given here. Okay. So if you go for that, we call as a checklist. The slide is changing or not?
Yes, sir.
Can
Yes, sir.
anyone
Changing,
read?
sir.
Can anyone read the slide, please?
Yes, sir. It is
Yes,
checklist
sir.
question.
Yes, sir. It's changing.
No, read. What is there?
Okay, sir. So it says that checklist questions are a type of closed-end question that allows respondents to select multiple options from a list of possible answers.
Excellent. So you try
Yes,
to
sir.
understand, huh? So you understand this point. So you need to be very clear. I always say your objective. What is your objective and how you are formulating? This is that we call that a checklist question. Many times, so you ask yourself related to your objective by what is the nature of the questions that you need to formulate. Okay, so you understand one is dichotomy, another is determinant, another one is checklist. Another one that we called as if you go for that is called as a scale questions. Huh? Yes or no? You just look at it. Always, you read this slide. Yeah?
Yes,
So
sir.
what is
We can see
written
that.
here? Huh. So you just look. If you go for broadly in this
Excuse
social
me, sir.
science, yes.
Ex- Sir, checklist and checklist questionnaire equal or not? Same.
Checklist?
Checklist and checklist question are same
Yes,
or
yes,
different?
yes, same. You just look at your course nature of the questions that the options that you want to select, not one. Checklist means you are out of multiple options. So you are selecting 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever you have. Suppose I say last week what you have done. So you have gone for movie, you have gone for out, you have whatever you have done. So it is the same. Huh? That is the generally language that we are talking about. So checklist questions.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
In, but sir, in the checklist cases, we only give importance on the statement and the response and the statement. And the statement are
Yes.
given the two forms. One will be known as the yes and no.
This is
Checklist.
dichotomy. If you go for, if you check, that is not yes and no, I say this is dichotomy, only two options.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, Likert scale, it is very, very important on the contest that you needs to very clear that most of the researcher in the contemporary times, you want to know the perception, you want to do the evaluation study. Most of the time, this is the one of the best method of formulating questions to your answer or to your objective. Okay, always that we called as a Likert scale is given on the 5-point scale. You just look at it. So you can say strongly agree or neutral or disagree or strongly disagree. Okay, so your choice. Huh? Always 5 options are there. Out of this, most of the, this is very important. Most of the social science research, most of the perception that we call as a stakeholder perceptions, or you want to evaluate. Suppose I want to that do a survey that I am doing this course or since continuous manner, are you getting any benefit of the lecture that I am conducting in the Likert scale? So the evaluation of the study that I am making. So you will say, are you getting benefit of the lecture that we are doing? So you are strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. That means you on this basis. So I will able to analyze that how many of the respondents are giving the response of the, suppose 151 students join on this platform. So out of this, particularly out of 151, how many of have given strongly agree that this research method course should continue. Okay, on it is getting the benefit of that. So that way, if you go for, particularly that we call as a Likert scale questions, there is, if you go for, so you needs to be very, very clear in the most of the social science research that you are doing. And this is one point. But remember one thing, always I have seen many students, they put only Likert scale. Please don't do that. Always within this Likert scale, maybe I will discuss later, but maybe I will forget. But remember one thing. So always, if suppose I say that most of the students have not getting the benefit of the scholarship that government is providing. Okay, you find the data. Are you getting the scholarship? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. But this is not your answer. So you need to ask the questions. If you are saying no, then why you are not getting the government scholarship? Always, because that yes, no, because I have many times I have seen many researchers do the yes, no, yes, agree, disagree. But you need to provide the second questions that always I say, why? If suppose you don't like this lecture, or if you like this lecture, so why you are like this lecture? Or if you are not liking, why you are not liking? That is very, very essential rather than only putting the question yes, no. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
So far? Good. Now, so you that we call as a Likert scale. Most of the in the psychology, in the management, in the all the perception, all the evaluation study that we are conducting, many people we are using these Likert scale questions. But my humble request to all of you, please, besides, don't make all questions. I have seen students are making all questions either close-end and in the Likert scale format. No, your questions should consist of your that we call dichotomy. Your questions should consist of checklist. Your questions should consist of your or the determinant. Your questions should consist of the that we call as a Likert scale, or the questions should consist of the contingency question. I'm coming to this point. Okay, so you understand this point. I'm just moving. So you will ask me questions. I will try to answer. Okay, you know that is another way that rating. You know, particularly Ola, Ubero, most of the evaluation, the feedback that we are giving. Okay, that you on the 5 point or 10 point. So you just give the feedback that particularly the questions that we call as a, if you go for Likert scale. This is not Likert, this is a rating, the technical term that you need to understand, the rating questions. Okay, so 1 to 5. Okay, so how the question is formulated in the Likert scale and how you are giving the rating. Most of the, you know, that particularly all the Ola, all the Ubero, all the feedback as a customer that you are giving to your service that you are getting. So that you have to keep in point. That is the nature of questions that you are formulating for your study. Then you just look at it. I hope here I have already explained this one. Is it visible? I know. I hope you know that we call that bipolar. Bipolar means, so you just imagine. So if you go for bipolar, extreme, two end. Okay, always same question nature, same format that we have given. You just understand. So that we call as a bipolar. So only two extreme are there. Okay, so within that extreme, so you can give 5, you can give 7, you can give, generally we give 5 and 10. Okay, on this bipolar question that we are talking about. And another questions that we call as a matrix questions. Okay, please read these matrix questions and try to understand what do you mean by matrix questions. Okay, so if you go for, just look at it, that if you go for, so on this particularly contest, okay, so what do you mean by this matrix question? Is it visible?
Sir.
Yes, just read, please.
Yes, sir.
Just read quickly. Just read quickly. Just read quickly on this matrix questions. Matrix
Prof.
questions. Yes.
Prof, can I ask a question?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I don't seem to get the difference between the bipolar and the Likert scale.
Likert, if you go for, remember one thing, Likert scale is limited to your 5-point scale. Okay, so if you go for, so here agree, your strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. These are the fixed rules with respective your Likert scale questions. But if you go for bipolar, generally it is a form of your rating. Rating, most of the rating that you are giving. So if the nature of the study is based on this, your objective is on this bipolar, means there you are, the rating that you are giving, suppose 1 to 5. 5 is very good and your 1 is very bad. Okay, so extreme. Or you are not, you are giving in 10 point. So 1 is very good or extreme good and your 10 is particularly very less. Most of the evaluation, most of the rating, suppose I am taking a lecture, so you want to do a survey. You are not collecting the data with respect to Likert scale. You try to understand, so what is the quality of my lecture that I want to collect the information from the respondent. So suppose you find most of the past participant after with 10, if given 9 or 10, that means my lecture was excellent. Okay, if suppose most of the respondent given 1, so I found that the lecture is very poor. Okay, so you as a researcher, so you need to decide what is the nature of the study, what is your objective, and what is the nature of questions that you want. So because of that is important whenever you are formulating the questions. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes. Thanks so much, Prof.
Now, you just move on this other dimension that we talk about, matrix questions. Means it is one multiple questions in one question, one set of questions, multiple questions. Just read the example that is given. Multiple, one dimension. Within this dimension, multiple questions are there. And with that, multiple questions are given in the Likert scale. That we called as a matrix questions. Okay, you just look at it, the example that I have given. That means one dimension. So suppose if you go for, particularly you want to evaluate Minaketan lecture that he is doing. So maybe one dimension, the lecture, the content that he is speaking first. And the second, you talk about the PPT that he has prepared, or the third, or the way he is speaking. Okay, and the fourth, the knowledge, Minaketan. So you as a researcher, that means one dimension, within one dimensions, you are formulating questions in the Likert scale. So that we called as a matrix questions. Okay, please try to understand. Same study, the another example that you is written, you need to understand this point. Am I clear?
Yes,
So
sir.
far I am clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
good.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Yes,
you
sir,
will ask
clear.
me. Okay, good. So now, so if you go for, you try to understand. So generally, if you go for, so you understand this is the situations the nature of the questions that we call. Another questions that we called as a contingency questions. This is many students I have in the interview board. When I ask the question to the students, what do you mean by contingency questions? That means related questions. Okay, if you go for just read, suppose if you go for particularly the contingency questions, try to understand. I hope you know nothing new. That means this is a questions. Okay, suppose I have some set of questions. So I say that when you say contingency means continuity. Suppose I say, so are you smoking cigarette? If you say yes, then I will proceed the other questions related to that. That means how many cigarettes per day you are consuming or smoking. Okay, so on next questions like this. So, but if I say no, then you go to the question number 12.5. That means the other question is not relevant to the respondent. So that we call as a contingency questions. Okay, so which most of the cases, so you try to understand generally that we call as a contingency questions. Whichever question is relevant, then you will ask the respondent, otherwise you proceed to the next question. That technically that we call as a consistency questions. Am I clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Clear. Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
now you
So can you
understand,
repeat
yes.
again
You just read.
the
Suppose
difference?
Barun. Yes, Barun, I am just asking. So Minaketan, are you, if you particularly on the contest, so are you married? So Barun, if you say, so no, I am not married. Okay, so I have other questions. So what is your next question? Suppose you are married, what is your wife name? So what is your wife age? How many children that you have? Okay, so related questions to that objective. If you are married, if you are not married, so all other question Barun to you is not relevant. So that is that we call as a contingency questions. That means you know all the NSSO data or the census data, all the unit level data, the module that is given. So in that module, so whichever question is not relevant, so you go to the next questions. Barun, am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, so you understand. So that means, so always my point of here to saying on this aspect that you as a researcher, so whenever, because most of the study, so whenever you are making questions, these are the different form of questions that you need to formulate, particularly for your study. Okay, so if you go for, like particularly on the contest, so if you go for the questions that I have given here somewhere, uh, close-end questions and open-end questions here. Okay, so if you go for, you just read, yeah, this always, now you understand what is the nature and particularly on the context of, now you understand all the close-end questions that you have discussed so far. And remember one thing, you as a researcher, whenever you are formulating these questions, always I say you need to be combination of all the questions that I have discussed. Okay, maybe first it should be close-end, it should be open-end. Open-end question, you know, I have already explained. So if you just read the slide quickly, so if you go for, remember one thing, so most of the cases, so close-end questions if you go for, because remember one thing, the most difficult problem in close-end is the data analysis. But if you go for, I have seen many students. So if you are, because your close-end questions, your data analysis, or when you collect the data, the analysis like your content analysis, your thematic analysis, your narrative analysis, your grounded theory, all these qualitative, because the open-end question is very difficult to analyze. Okay, so like the close-end question, because it is easy for you. And if you are doing so, you need to very clear all the structure that I have given. I always encourage you as a researcher. So your research questions, always you need to decide combination of the two, not only close-end, not only open-end. But if it is quantitative and it is sample size is very large, and you are want to collect, that we called as a, if you go for this, particularly on the contest that we talk about, your struct, if you go for close-end questions, number, magnitude, large sample size, and quantitative, then you apply that. And if your other side, if your nature is qualitative, and you need to decide, because all this information, and the one important dimension that we call as a structured question, unstructured question, semi-structured questions. I hope you know, I'm again repeating, last class someone asked me. So if you go for, when you say structured questions means same questions asking the respondent in the same manner. Like suppose I ask Barun your name, your father name, your mother name, your occupation, your land holding, same question respondent to in same order. So like land holding, occupation, same, that we call that a structured questions. And all that technically that we call that a predetermined. We have already determined. And this is the nature of the study. If your question is structured, then remember one thing, broadly it is close-end question. Broadly it implies that is the nature of the study is quantitative. And if you go for unstructured question is, that means you as a researcher, so there is no order. You are not asking same question, same order. So that if you go for unstructured, that means, so particularly on the contest, that you find that you know the objective of your study. So you ask first your income, your expenditure, or whatever you choice, you can ask. And you can ask, so that we call as a unstructured. And similarly, that we call as a semi-structured. Unstructured is always, remember one thing, that we call as a qualitative study. That you have to keep in mind whenever you are doing. And if you study, if it's mixed, that we call as a semi-structured. Quantitative, structured and unstructured combined together, that will give you semi-structured. When some questions are same order and other questions are not same order. So that we call also this pattern also you can follow whenever you are doing this research study. Okay, so I'm not going. I hope if you have any questions on this slide, on the different format that you need, you ask me, I will try to explain each term, but you just example, the definition, the use, the time, always you know. So always the important dimension that if you go for, because freedom, the bias is there. Most of the cases, you know, if you go for open-end questions, analysis is difficult and also bias is also there. So many dimensions are there. We are not going to discuss all this point, but you need to be very clear on this aspect that we are talking about. Okay, now let us move a little bit fast. So I will share the PPT. I'm not going this on this one. This is very, very important. And then I will explain a little bit. Remember one thing. So now you understand. So first, you objective, you understand your variable, you understand your indicator, because your indicator variable will determine, will easy to formulate questions. You understand the nature of the questions, whether it is close-end, whether it is open-end, and the different form of your close-end, you understand. Now, so remember one thing, the third point that whenever the nature of the questions. Okay, so always remember one thing, whenever you are the wording, how the question should be easy, should be simple, at least the respondent is easily or able to understand that questions. This is the important point you as a researcher, you need to keep in mind. All the point that I have given, I will explain now, all the explanations is there, like you need to understand the questions that you are formulating should be very simple, simple language. Okay, that is the important point. Always you need to be, there should not be any ambiguity. There the question, all the point. You need, I will explain one by one. So you try to just read it. I hope you all know nothing new. But if you go for particularly on this contest, so you need to keep in mind. And one point, please read what is written there. I hope you know. But what you do not know, I will try to explain that. Okay. So you first is that you try to give your best in the simple language. And the important point, maybe if you go for, try to convert the questions in the mother tongue. Suppose I am working in Odisha. So suppose if I will put in Hindi or English, that's fine. I formulate. But please try to convert into the, suppose mother tongue is Odia. So we can make the question in Odia form because it is easy for. Suppose I am working on tribes. So you know, whatever the local language is there, try your best to convert in that language. That is the essential point that you have to keep in mind. Okay, so all the point that you just look at it always. So now the important dimensions that you need to keep in mind whenever that we call that the leading questions, loaded questions. Many times, please give more emphasis on this point. I hope many students have no idea or what do you mean by leading questions and loaded questions. So if you go for, this is important questions that at least you know. I am not explaining, you will ask me, I will, you just read. When you say leading questions means, when you say lead, L-E-A-D, leading, that means whom lead? The researcher leading. Okay, to whom? The respondent. That means the researcher, the way he or she wants the answer, the question itself, the answer is given. Or the respondent or the researcher force the respondent the way or he or she wants to find the answer. Okay, so that we call as a leading questions. Suppose I say, I am putting a question. So is BJP is going to win in UP election? Okay, so if you go for, in the question itself, I am giving the answer to the respondent that in the BJP term, this which party? So I should write rather than, I should say that which party is going to win in Uttar Pradesh in the coming elections. So you are getting point. So that means if you go for, so particularly, so always you try to avoid leading questions. Am I clear? Leading questions, yes or no? Please. Am I audible?
Clear. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Please, many times, many students do not understand what do you mean by leading questions. Leading questions means researcher force the respondent to answer the way he or she likes. That means in other way, in the question itself, the answer is at least the respondent is given to answer the way he or she likes. Are you getting point? Suppose I say during this accident times, the question just you read on this point. Okay, what is written there? So that you need to keep on this point whenever you are doing this leading and loaded question. And another one.
Sir.
So you, yes.
Sir, I had a query. Sorry to interrupt. Now I'm just trying to understand the leading questions. Like many times we create this Likert scale questions. मतलब जो आपने matrix वाला questions बताया था. And the point I wanted to ask is that suppose I'm asking urea is available in the shop at all times. Now, will you call this a leading question then? मतलब आप थोड़ा
Maybe
सोच के
if you go,
बताइएगा.
you just look at the context. No, yes, you just look at it. So if you go in the questions, if you are giving the answer, so you just imagine the objective is not to, like, suppose I need to objective that my intention is which party is going to win in the coming elections. This is my objective. My objective is not to tell that BJP, whether BJP is going to win or not. That is my not objective. My objective is to which party is going to win. So I say, I put the question, the leading questions in the format that which party is going to win. If I say, do you think that BJP is going to win in the UP election? That means in question itself, you are providing the answer to the respondent. So like the question that I have posed in the slide, just look at it. So suppose you ask during the accident, that's fine.
Sir,
But
in
if you
this
say
question
that
only, suppose I ask this question in a Likert scale format. जहाँ पे वो 1 to 5 का scale है, 1 is strongly disagree and 5 is strongly agree. So when I ask the question, will BJP is going to win this election? So 5
so
point
that is
Likert scale.
different. That is the nature of the question is different. That is the nature of the question is different, because you specific, you want these questions, that you, and also the question you are posing in form of Likert scale. So the structure is different. Are you getting the point? Here, your intention question is totally different. So if you are converting in the Likert scale, then you can put that whether BJP or Congress or the all other party is going to win or not. That you can do it. That is not issue. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Now, so you understand leading question, please. Many times, many professor, many students have no idea on that. Okay, another question is that we call as a loaded questions. Loaded questions means you need to avoid, always you need to avoid loaded questions. Loaded questions is, suppose if you go for, have you stopped beating your wife? Suppose if I will ask Barun, have you stopped beating your wife? So in this sense, suppose if you say yes, that is also a problem. That means before you are that you yourself, you are that's saying that okay, I have also beaten my wife. So if you say no, that is also a problematic. Okay, suppose I say, have you stopped cheating in the class? Okay, so if you say yes, that is also problematic. If you say no, that is also problematic. So always remember one thing, that when you are formulating questions, so loaded questions, you needs to particularly stop. And you should not ask leading questions or loaded questions. Am I clear or not?
Clear, sir.
Good. So if you have any questions, please. So this is the meaning of leading questions and loaded questions. Another one is that we called as a, this is essential, that we called as a, this one, this slide, that if you go for particularly, the slide is visible, just look at it, that we called as a double-barrel questions. What do you mean by double-barrel questions? You read. That means in a single time, you are asking more than 2 questions or more than 1 question simultaneously. Okay, you just look at it, please read. So that means you as a researcher always ask 1 question and 1 point of time. That is the important dimension. If suppose you just look at it, that means you combine one, like the question that is given. Okay, so if you go for particularly on this contest, do you feel that the hospital emergency room waiting area is clean and comfortable. So if respondent, that means you are asking two questions simultaneously. If suppose the respondent is answering yes, that maybe I am not comfortable on cleaning, but I am comfortable.
Your voice is
Yes.
breaking.
My voice is breaking, so maybe I hope some network issue. Let us see. Am I audible now?
It's okay.
It's okay, sir.
Yes, audible.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Your voice is not breaking, sir. Audible.
Okay, good. Suppose I say that means you should not ask two questions simultaneously. Suppose I say one question, मान लो. If you go for, are you satisfied with your income and working condition? I am asking, are you satisfied with your income and working condition? Suppose if I ask questions on this. So that means you are asking two questions simultaneously. You are asking your income. Maybe I am satisfied with the working condition, but I am not satisfied with the income. Or I am maybe satisfied with income, not working condition. So you need to ask one question. Are you satisfied with your income? First question. Second question. Are you satisfied with your working conditions? The second question. So that we call as a double-barred questions, means you should not ask two questions, three questions simultaneously. Okay, so that is the important point that you as a researcher, you needs to keep on this point that we called as a, if you go for this. And another questions, you know, I am not going this, the ambiguity questions. Always you as a researcher, you know that often, occasionally, regularly, frequently, many, good, poor, these are the different meaning for different individuals. Suppose I say, if you go for frequency, okay, so particularly for me, the exactly what do you mean by the frequently? So for me, maybe one time, two times is frequently, but for other, maybe, so it is more than that. Okay, so you as a researcher, you needs to be clear on this point. I'm not going through this. Please try to just understand. If you have any questions, you will ask me. I will try my best to answer all this point. Okay, like this one. This slide is visible. Okay, so the important dimension. Okay, so you just look at it, that assumption-based questions. Assumption-based questions is also very, if you go for particularly on the context that we talk about. Okay, so if you go for suppose memory-based, assumption-based, all types of hypothetical questions, always you needs to avoid whenever you are formulating a questionnaire. And that is the important point. I hope you all know. Like suppose I say, if you will be the education minister of India, what you will do? You are asking the question to the respondent. Always you needs to be very clear. So looking at the mental, the understanding, the literacy, so always you need to ask the question and you need to formulate the question. So always you needs to avoid the hypothetical question. All the point is written there. So in this slide, I hope you need to understand. Then you understand this point. And this is another point that I will explain. Then I will come to your other point. This is very, very essential. Many times I say that please, many students have no idea that we call as the technically term that we call as a pre-testing or pilot testing. When you develop your instrument, you finalize your questions first. When you finalize your first, how you will proceed? Now, this is my objective one. On the basis of objective, these are the 10 questions that will answer first objective. The other 10 questions are there. This will address my second objective. The 10 another questions that will address my third objective. Okay. So when you structure the questions first, discuss with your friends first. This is the important. your all the research scholar or your friends or your other faculty member, or in the academic network. Suppose I am here and you are sending your questionnaire and you send your objective and questions that you have prepared. So you take your feedback because you give your best to revise the question as much as possible. Once it is revised, then you need to do the pilot testing, pre-testing. You just read, what do you mean by pilot testing or pre-testing? The general intention is that, so we do pilot testing, the questions that we have prepared, is the question is correct or anything is missing in that questions. Whether the respondent is able to answer the questions or not. Whether the questions flow naturally or not. Or whether the respondent is facing any problem on that. Okay, whether there is a questions which is not relevant to these questions, to the respondent. Or whether this particularly new dimensions questions needs to be added, but it is not there. All this is need to revisit. That is called as a pre-testing of the questionnaire. That we call as a pilot testing of the questionnaire. And this is very important, all my dear friends, that you have to keep in mind, that we call as a pilot testing of the questionnaire. Okay, so what you will do now, where you will collect pilot testing, and this is important. Pilot testing should not be done in the same selected sample or selected villages. Always you need to keep in mind. Always pilot testing should be close to the study area and close to the sample villages. Suppose I am working in a one village called Bharatpur, and close to the Bharatpur village, what are the other villages are available in that area? So my pilot study will be done there. And the respondent will be also close to that villages. And the respondent should not be the final respondent that you are going to collect the data. So you have to keep this point. And then when you go to the field, at least suppose you are doing 400 survey, 30 to 40 as a pilot testing is more than sufficient to know the particularly the pilot testing that you can conduct. Okay, so then, so what is the addition, what is the subtraction, what is the order that you need to keep on this point. This is the something you as a researcher, you need to keep this point as whenever. I always say, if you are doing field survey, it is must that at least you need to think on the aspect that we are talking about. Okay, that we call generally. So maybe, so pilot testing, with the pilot testing, you will be able to identify. So is the respondent is facing any problem to answer the questions or unclear questions that the respondent is not able to understand that questions. Okay, so also the length of the questions, many dimensions you, whenever you are doing, so you will be able to understand on this that we called as a particularly on this aspect. Okay, that we call as a pilot testing. Now, your pilot testing is done. So you understand now your question is ready. Okay, so you revisit, restructure. Whenever, remember one thing that we called as a most of the literature whenever we are doing on the structure. And so always you as a researcher, whenever you are doing in this particularly context of the always, so you need to keep in mind always when you follow the questions, you always try to you understand. So first, so always you need to keep the general questions. Okay, so easy questions. So not sensitive questions. Okay, okay. So you need to generally that we call as a we as a researcher always you need to provide general information. Don't go you ask a respondent, tell me your income. No, you just ask what is your name, what is whether you have APL, BPL, how many family members you have, how many what is your literacy rate, what is your occupation, what is your land holding. Okay, so that means whenever you are formulating the order of the questions, you needs to you always you as a researcher you needs to keep on this point. This is very, very essential whenever you are doing the order. So always you needs to be, whenever you are going to fill, so always the order you have to decide. Okay, so common questions you needs to ask generally in the first format. Then, so you may be on the general main that we call as a middle questions. So middle questions is generally related to your research objective, which related to your objective. And maybe all these end sensitive questions or the important questions, or the personal questions or the income related questions, you need to ask whenever, always, or whenever you are doing, so that you have to keep on the latter step. So you as a researcher, you need to be very clear whenever you are particularly formulating the questions and the order you have to follow on this format. That means, so you all the demographic profile you need to give first. Then you need to provide all the thematic related to your objective. And then the third, you need to provide the attitudinal, the perceptions related questions. And the last, you need to provide the sensitive questions, the personal questions. And that is the order that you need to follow on this aspect. Am I clear or not? Understand or not? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you just imagine now. So you now your questions order is finished. Now remember one thing. So if you go for I have already given this. You just look at it, the form, layout, all these things in this PPT. I have already explained. So easy to difficult, simple, all this point that you need to. Then always one point that you need to keep in mind, that first important point, you need to write always in the schedule or in the questions, always the first paragraph. Maybe I will share you maybe in this All India Research Scholar Group 1 sample copy. You just look at it. This first is that we called as a important dimension, who you are. So what about your research? Okay, this is very, very essential. So if you go for, so this is very important in the sense that remember one thing, because if you know, because always, and the consent of the respondent is must, and your identity is must. Who you are, that should be must. What is your research objective? That should be clear. Okay, in the first paragraph, you introduce yourself, who you are, and why you are collecting the data. Okay, so you as a respondent, that is the important point. You as a researcher, whenever you are formulating, these are the questions that you have to keep in mind. Okay, so if I summarize all these points, so you need to keep on this point that first, you need to be very clear what is your research question, what is your research objective, what is your research hypothesis. Second step, you need to follow that who is your target population, where is your study located. Okay, and then the third point you need to keep in mind, what are the different variables, indicator with respective to your objective. So you need to identify each variable, each indicator with respective to each objective. And the questions, the nature of questions, whether it is closed end, whether it is open end, that you have to keep in mind. And then third, you need to keep in mind that we called as a important dimension that we called as a your pilot testing. And then you need to the structure, the order of the questions. And then important and the consent that we are talking about, and the past, the structure, the layout that you are talking. Then you finalize the questions, discuss with the supervisor, and take the printout. This is something that you need to keep in mind. And another point, maybe I forget here, that particularly coding itself. And now in the contemporary times, coding is very, very essential. I forget to mention that point, but I will share the sample copy. You can just look at in the All India Research Scholar group. So I should stop now. If now the floor is open, you can ask any questions related to anything related to on this topic or any other topic. Okay, let me stop it.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for conducting this series. It is really very helpful. So first of all, thank you so much. My question is about the validation of the